Builds with Blocks.
Welcome to Builds with Blocks, a show centered around the micro action figures and brick-based construction sets of the Halo universe. I'm your host, Colin Perkins, and I'm joined by Tom Fishenden.
Hello there.
Matt Salvatore.
How we doing?
Gabe Clem.
Hey, guys.
And once again, Kevin MCX from Mega.
Hey, everyone.
The votes have been cast, and a winner has been chosen for the first ever Mega Construx Halo Heroes fan vote. As you're most likely aware, Spartan Haunted beat out the likes of the Flood, Thrall Slayer, and the CQB. As a result, Spartan Haunted will be included in the upcoming Halo Heroes Series 16, which will be available in the fall of 2022. Kevin, what did you think? Were people excited about this? How did it go?
Well, I guess I should flip the question over to you guys. How did you like it? I mean,
oh boy.
I could, on the Mega side, I think that it was a huge success. We didn't think we'd have that many votes. We weren't expecting, we weren't expecting. We knew the community would show up, but we weren't expecting such engagement. So it was a really, really nice surprise. But I'm curious to know what you guys thought about it. Was it?
Yeah, there was like almost 30,000 votes or something like that from what I saw, which is fantastic. So from my perspective, I loved seeing the engagement. I loved popping into the vote. I was on vacation during the vote, so I had to kind of scramble a bit with the bad internet that I had at the time. But it's really fun keeping an eye on how things went. I was expecting a little more jostling though. The first day, things were kind of set, and there was I think maybe the spread happened a little bit further. But it seemed like the Flood fans and the Thrall Slayer fans just couldn't agree on which one they wanted, and so the Haunted took it. And by the way, I called it.
He did call it. Yeah, he's never gonna let us forget that one.
Yeah.
Gabe, what were your thoughts?
Well, it certainly wasn't what I was predicting. I was set on assuming that Flood was going to win, just because
I think we all did.
I'm sure Tom can relate to this. Like, I know what the old Mega Construx community would have gone for. Like, old Mega Construx community, Flood would have run over every other figure in competition. But I forget that. I mean, that was years ago, and there's so many new fans, and I think Haunted is more of it's like a flashy, it's a Haunted, it's a Spartan with a skull in it. Flood is like, okay, like it's Flood. But to someone like me or Tom or like older collectors, we're like, oh wow, we haven't gotten new Flood in years. That would be amazing. And with all of that said, if there was any Spartan that was going to be made that we haven't gotten before, Haunted is awesome. Like I'm still happy that Haunted's coming. I just was shocked that Flood lost so badly. Like,
well,
I was voting for Flood. They weren't last, but I mean they was third, right? Did Thrall Slayer end up beating Flood?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So I had voted for Flood the first 3 days, and then when I saw that Thrall Slayer was just it wasn't going to come up, I moved my votes over to Thrall Slayer to try and boost it, and Flood just kept falling behind, and Haunted kept gaining, and I was like, okay, this kind of seems set. So I mean, I kept pushing for Thrall Slayer, but for
the record, I shifted my votes too, just to see what would happen.
Your pity vote?
I shifted over to Thrall Slayer because I'd be happy with that one as well. But it just kept falling behind a little bit. It stayed up there, and I was like, okay. So I mean, for all of the Haunted fans, I hope you all are happy. But I am excited to see the new Spartan when it's finished. I'm looking forward to that a lot. Well, and Kevin's here to talk about that a bit. We will, we'll go through our general what we've been up to. But then Kevin's here to take us through kind of the history of the micro action figure, which is going to be a fun conversation. We alluded to that in our previous conversation. Was that back in last November? Oof, it was a long time ago. And then we'll talk about what the process is to create the new figure, which will be a really fun and interesting conversation for people as well. Tom, anything else to add on reaction quick?
I just think it was really cool seeing, like you were saying, Kevin, how much the community was embracing it. Because I can remember logging into the forums one day, and it was literally like I'd logged into a political campaigning page with so many people like, no, you have to vote for this one because... And there were people who were like, CQB fans, abandon it, vote for Flood, we need you. And I'm sure I actually saw the We Need You poster remade at one point with Mega Construx figures, which was so cool.
Right. Matt, Team Thrall Slayer, how you feeling?
Yeah, actually, I am kind of sad that the Thrall lost, but if you go back to our initial episode, I think I was also pretty set on the Haunted being a figure because of, I think both the Thrall and the Haunted had like a rarity factor within the lore and stuff like that I think would push them above the Flood. Sorry, Gabe. But
no, I mean, you're right, obviously.
But so I am super excited to see the whole process behind this, and I think, like Tom said, it was really, really awesome just seeing everyone like campaign for different figures. I think.
Well, it was similar rhetoric too. It was like, why would you choose this one? We never will see this other one. It was like, it was that harsh, like, oh yeah, gotta pick this one. It's the only right choice.
Yeah, right? It was a fan vote that has come out of 2020 for sure.
Yeah, right.
But it was really exciting. I think just the whole process. I think Evolved put out a couple of tweets like showing the stats every day. Got tons of engagement on that, and I was really happy to see a lot of names get in there. Like I mentioned in our like reaction episode, Ian from Halo Cannon was super involved, and a lot of people. So I thought it was just from like a fan perspective, watching the community really kind of circle around this and talk about Mega, I think just really kind of was special in and of itself. And I'm excited that the Haunted won. I think it can be a good figure, so I'm really excited. It will
hopefully.
Yeah.
Pressure's on, Kevin.
Yeah, hopefully we'll put something together that will please even the people who didn't vote for it.
Ooh,
so we're making a figure hopefully that will at least some that most people will like.
The People's Spartan.
Yes,
the People's Spartan.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, let's go around the horn real quick. It's been a while since we've all been on the show and just talk about what we've been up to. We'll end with Kevin since he's got some stuff in that background I want to talk about.
Oh yeah.
But why don't we, Tom? What have you been doing on the Mega front?
Okay, so I am going to plug something that's not Evolved related quickly. I did my first Call of Duty Mega Construx review in about 5 years. Because I got the Call of Duty Warzone Squad pack, which was really awesome. And I also got my second Banished Banshee that I basically had a really stressful week at work. So I was like, I'm buying some Mega Construx. It's just happening. Yeah.
He stress buys. He's a stress buyer, guys.
Yeah, I am. And I also got, I've probably just disappeared from my camera completely. Yep. I got this little thing as well.
Hey, the red one.
Oh, I've still been looking for that guy.
So yeah, really like this. Really like the little personal AI print that's in it. I think that's really cool.
Yep.
So yeah,
nice.
That's me.
Cool. I'll toss it to you, Matt.
Well, actually, I got my Chopper Takedown.
Yeah. Where'd you find that one?
Actually, I got it at Target online. I had a pre-order going in Amazon for so long, and they kept pushing the date back.
Right.
So I just abandoned it, and I got this, and it, so I actually got two. So I have, this is the unbuilt copy, and then I got the build one right here.
Yeah.
And I got to say, Mega upped its game from the last previous choppers. I really like it a lot, and I think I don't think a Brute has ever looked as good as Eshram.
For sure.
So he looks pretty awesome. And then I have really fallen off the bandwagon, and I've just gone full force into Masters of the Universe sets. And I may have not just bought Grayskull while we were talking. So I've got I think I have all the sets that are available now, and I was doing a bunch of stop motion with them.
Battle Bones, baby.
Yeah. So I have to say and this is my first, like, I don't own any Call of Duty figures or sets, and I've only ever bought from Mega Halo. So this was kind of like my first step into that pond. Okay. And, you know, it's really interesting the way Matt, and I don't want to turn this into the Masters of the Universe conversation, but it's the way the builds are, it's not like it's different from Halo. I mean, it's a different universe and everything like that, but it almost feels a little more experimental to me, like with the Panther has the fur.
Oh yeah,
So that's really intriguing, and so I'm really impressed with it, and I'm definitely gonna be buying all of them from now on. So
right, love it. Gabe, how about you?
Well, I think since all of us last recorded together, I did my first standalone video review on the channel.
Yeah,
of the Banished Chopper takedown.
Chopper.
I was super
video,
excited.
By the way,
thank you.
It was terrific. Yeah,
guys, Kevin watched it. So, yeah, I was super excited to make that video. One, because I've wanted to branch into YouTube content for a while now, and also I think at the time nobody else had gotten theirs yet. That was a pre-order from Amazon that randomly showed up one day, and it was you guys who were like, "Hey, you should review it."
The you cranked that thing out in a day. You got it. We're like, do a review, and you did it, and it was like 24 hours. Actually, less. It was amazing.
The build was fantastic. The figures are perfect. I love Eshram so much. I was very impressed with how you all pulled off his armor, especially with those prongs coming off of his shoulders. That was very impressive. Like Tom, I also found the red micro helmet. So got myself my first, I guess this is, what is it, Hermes? The Kelly style armor?
Yes.
So I got my first figure of that. That's a super neat little build. I found a couple more Series 3 Halo Infinite blind bags.
Oh, nice.
The Halo series blind bags. Very happy about those. But outside of just regular collecting, I'm still working on figures. I finished recently with my partner. We made a Mega Construx style skewer rifle.
Yeah, that looks good.
I saw that.
Paired that with
awesome.
a custom Mark 7. And
I think it's big. It's like,
oh yeah. I mean, it's tanky, but I was very excited about that collaboration with him. And a lot of other people seem to like it as well. So we've got some cool stuff coming up soon that we thought up, and I'm really excited to make more stuff.
Nice. Well, Halo Infinite's coming. It's getting here. So we're going to see all sorts of new stuff that you can create, which will be fun. I'll go real quick. I went through, and I think I'm done with my Halo 5 sets. I have to the floor over here waiting for our conversation, the best Halo 5 sets. I built that Spirit. Ooh, that Spirit. That Spirit's nice. And I have my Infinity right over here on the shelf. That was also a fun time.
It's not on the floor anymore?
No, I finally moved it. Yep. I had a whole bunch of other stuff, Transformers, on the shelf, so I moved them off. And now it has its own shelf. And it's got Sarah Palmer on it, too, because, I'm a
there you go.
Yep. So I'm excited for that. I was on vacation for a couple weeks. That's why Matt and Gabe took the helm on their kind of recap of the vote. Thanks for doing that, guys. And then I did grab a chopper that actually showed up from Amazon. I got my 2 from Amazon, so I built that. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about that more at a later date. I'll throw it to you, Kevin. It's been since the pandemic started, I think. That we chat, or maybe it was middle pandemic. I forget when we talked last. But what have you been up to lately? I guess we're interested to hear how things are going and how things are going from working from home.
Things are going well. Right now, the team is finishing up the last design work on the fall 2022 line.
Yeah.
And handing off documentation, and we're getting ready to pass the baton to the production team so that they can set it up. Awesome. It's already started, with new molds, new tools are being cut, and information starting to be shared. So 2022 will be wrapping up the next few weeks, I guess. Mm-hmm. We've already started having meetings on what 2023 is going to look like. Wow. And so that's what's been occupying my time quite a bit these last few weeks. So yeah, that's what's been keeping me busy.
So real quick, and then I do want to talk about figure stuff. This is figure related. So we did the fan vote, and you're talking about you're wrapping up 2022. So is it going to be a little bit of a rush to get in the Haunted, to get that built into that line?
The Halo Heroes series, we pushed that like schedule wise, like to the very edge of where we could, and still make the on shelf dates.
Gotcha.
Just because we wanted to be able to do the vote as late as possible to minimize the time between the actual vote and the time that people can actually buy it. So we're going to be fast tracking it, but it's still going to make the next year's fall date, which is usually July-ish.
Yeah. So and you already know who's gonna be partnered with the Haunted. We'll find that out at a later date. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We'll reveal that when it's time, sometime next year, probably.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. We're excited.
This is exciting, man.
Yeah. To see who Spartan Haunted hangs out with.
I keep forgetting though. Like I've been so focused on the Haunted, but he's coming with a whole other.
Yeah, there's other figures with him too.
Other figures,
Four other figures in that series. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be fun. All right. Well, so as many of you know, Kevin is a lead product designer at Mega and has been working on the Halo products since they acquired the license. He and his team have taken the winner, are going to be taking that winner that we talked about, the Haunted, through the production process. And Kevin will talk about that a little bit later in the show. But what we wanted to do before that is we wanted to go back and look at kind of the history of the micro action figure. And I don't know how far back you can go, Kevin, if you can go back to the creation of like I don't know if it's 1.0 articulation, like with the Marvel stuff and all that. But we're very interested to hear kind of about the history of, the micro action figure, what sets it apart from the other brands, right? And kind of that process. So, take it away from there.
Sure. All right. So the start of the micro action figure at Mega, really, I think it can start around 2005 with there was a line called Pirates at the time. Mm-hmm. And that, I don't know if anybody remembers that one. Yeah. It ran for a few years, but it actually introduced figures for the first time in construction anyway that had augmented articulation versus what was available on the market at the time.
Right.
So, when I mean augmented, it means, there were ball joints in the shoulders, on the neck, on the hips. The elbows bent, the hands could turn, and the knees could bend. And so there was a lot of that stuff, or those learnings design-wise, that we applied when we got to Halo a few years later. So
before you go that far, though, I'm interested. Yeah. So what was that figure before? I don't think I go further back, or was that the very first figure you created? Was it for the Pirates line?
No, there was. We had figures before that. They were a little bit more closely related to what was on the market at the time. Sure. So a lot less. They had just the standard articulation. The neck could turn. We had like a good example would be like the old Dragons line.
Mm-hmm.
The legs could move individually. The shoulders could move. The hands didn't swivel, and the head could swivel only side to side. So it's basically just 5 points, 5 points of articulation. So the Pirates really ratcheted it up a notch because of the knees, the elbows, and the integration of the ball joints.
Gotcha.
So
Pirates had that articulation. Years. And then was that Alien Agency one, Tom?
Yes.
That had the same articulation?
I was sat here like Alien Agency is my OG. I actually, Kevin, after we last spoke, I was able to, and I'm sorry, I'm going off track for a second. I got the factory set in box in the original Mega Brands factory seal box as well. And I opened that and was just looking through the old catalogue that came with it, with all of the old brands. Like, this is nostalgia for me right here.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. That was a great line. It had the clay and the molds and to build the aliens. Yeah.
And then so Marvel, and then Marvel had that as well.
Exactly.
Right?
So Marvel sort of Marvel, if I recall correctly, used the Halo model. So we had already evolved we had already evolved the figure from the Pirates to the Halo articulation at the time when we brought in Marvel. So what happened was, so we started with Pirates. We took that when we built the first Halo figures, but I remember we sat down as a team and we talked to the digital sculptors and said, okay, so how do we take, how do we improve some of the proportions, first of all, because there were some, we could improve on that. And then, how do we add even more articulation to create the Halo figures? So I remember we added the hip articulation, added the hole in the back, which has become a standard part of all our figures now. But at the time, it was new for Halo. But if you take a look at the old figures, the ones that are built like this, but smaller.
What reaction?
That's a mega.
It's a mega micro.
That's
figure.
awesome.
I
want one.
These guys, actually, the first ones, until we changed to the super articulation, they reused parts from the old Pirates figures. The hands and the hip connector are the same parts that continued since the very beginning.
Wow.
Interesting.
So
real quick, though,
the Genesis was really that line.
I want to ask a little bit of, so you wanted to do the newer I guess the first iteration on the enhanced articulation to set yourselves apart from other brands, right?
Exactly.
And then you continued that, but do you remember with the initial reception to that? I would imagine it would have been positive, but do you remember kind of what fans were saying about it, or just internally? You probably can't talk about sales, but were things going in a positive direction, I would imagine, to keep going down that path?
Well, the Halo line did very well when it launched.
Yeah.
And the thing is that it was a bit of a different time in 2009. There wasn't the instant, social media was still a couple of years away. So we saw some fan reaction online through a couple of forums at the time. But the sales, I think, were phenomenal. So obviously something resonated with fans, and so it allowed us to, the first year we had just the Mark IV Spartan, we had the Elite, the regular Elite from Halo Wars, the Grunt, and we did a Flame Marine at the time. Yeah. Those were the only figures that were in the first series, but the success of the line actually allowed us to expand and to bring in figures from previous Halo titles as well. So a year or two later, 2010, 2011, you started seeing CQB and Hayabusa and all these other figures being added, the Brutes and the Marines and all that stuff too. So,
and you were doing blind bags at the time too, and you were doing blind bags from the previous or from the other licenses as well, right? So that was a thing that you saw sell positively for other brands, and you brought into Halo, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
The blind bags for Halo were set up in the second year. And exactly. So it was definitely something that caught fire the second we released the first series. It was really, really popular. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. People were still tracking those down.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I've spent so much money. Oh my God, so much money.
But then, after that, what happened was that in Call of Duty, when we introduced that line, that upped the ante even more, because now all of a sudden, some of the ball joints in the figures were replaced with pins, which allowed for more dynamic posing, especially on the elbows.
So there's no old articulation Call of Duty. There's only new articulation Call of Duty.
Exactly. So
gotcha. So you introduced it with that.
And then that caught fire. So and at that point, Halo had been around for 4 or 5 years, and we figured, fans have been reacting positively to Call of Duty. Let's do this for Halo as well.
Yeah.
And that's how that came about. So we started from the Call of Duty figure and what we'd learned on that, and we applied it to Halo. And what that looked like was basically at the time, since we did have 4 or 5 years of history in the line, we didn't readapt the Call of Duty figure exactly. You know, as you know, there are slight differences in build, and there's a slight difference in height. Yeah. And since we didn't want to obsolete people's collections overnight, we said, well, let's keep the scale of a previous. So if you put an old articulation figure, Halo, and a new one side by side, they're the same height. The new articulation is a little bit bulkier just because of the removable armor, but basically they're the same size. So a new articulation figure fits in the very first Warthog we did. Yeah, and that was important to us at the time, and it's still important to us, obviously. So so that's how that came about.
And the removable armor came alongside the new articulation too, right?
Yeah, well, that's actually something that was also part of the Call of Duty learnings, because Call of Duty have the removable vest and everything. For Halo, we developed the front and back aspect, so that you know the Spartans, the armor comes apart in the middle, whereas Call of Duty and like Halo Marines have vests that just snap over top of the head. But it's you know, it's really very much another iteration on learnings that we did throughout, like starting from Pirates and then Call of Duty and then
May I ask, what was the first like 2.0 figure that Mega produced in box? Was it the Master Chief in the broadsword?
That's a very good question. We actually, the first season that we introduced the new articulation, we rebooted like all of the UNSC at once. Yeah. So it'd be tough to say which figure was first.
Because it came out with a full line, right? So
because the whole line, I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
It was
thinking of the right line.
It was a pretty hefty line at the time. So you know, I remember there was I believe the rookie. Oh no, was that the right year? Yeah. Or was it Emil on the mongoose?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were some ODSTs that with the shark that were some. It was like almost like a transition where they carried through with the shark, and that was kind of cool.
Yeah. And it was timed also. You know, we were still very close to Halo 5, so there was a bunch of Halo 5 armors in there. I remember the Oceanic. You know, we did some members of Majestic as well. You know, so Scout, the Recruit, and all those wonderful armors as well. So, the size or the number of armors that we had to redesign or to adapt that season was enormous. I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of new molds that we created that year to be able to evolve just the UNSC side, and you know the Covenant. At the time, it was the Covenant. It was that also came out, but we pulsed it out. So we did the Elites next, I think, the following year, and then the Brutes and the Jackals and the Grunts somewhere along in there as well.
Mini Grunts.
Yeah, the mini Grunts became bigger Grunts.
Have there been 3 molds? There been 3 molds for the Grunt?
Yeah.
There was the minis.
There was the mini.
Yeah.
And then I think there were 3.
Then there's a little bigger, and then the new articulation.
The wrists, isn't there? And then the full articulation.
Yeah. The grunts are like a perfect example to see how amazing how it's like completely been fine-tuned to what we have now, you know. Like I still have some of my little mini grunts and I'm super nostalgic about them, but you know, they're the new ones are leagues better. It's
the
amazing.
big ones are scaled fairly appropriately too. Yeah. You know, I mean, they're bigger than people give them credit for.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Well, on the scale charts, a grunt is actually the same height as a Marine, but except much wider, much bulkier.
Yeah.
So, we get the impression they're tiny because we're always playing as Master Chief. But
if
you're a regular human next to a grunt, I don't want to meet a grunt in an alleyway somewhere.
I remember I remember going to Halo Outpost Discovery, and they have a big wall there with all the sizes of the Covenant, like hunters, elites, and brutes and things. I walked up to a grunt, and I don't think I could fight one. There's no way.
Right.
I know, right? And they're much wider, so like imagine like trying to. That's crazy.
I mean, he could just punch me in the face. I'm gone. There's no way.
That's pretty scary that a grunt's that big. I can only imagine what a hunter looks like. Like,
oh,
jeez.
Or brute, man. I mean, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the fun thing though about like the hunters. So can you talk about hunters in general? They're kind of fall outside of this a bit, but they're the big boys of the line, right? So can you talk about the process of coming up with those guys?
Yeah, sure. Well, the first ones we did were I think for the second series of Halo. So we designed them along the Halo Wars aesthetic. Yeah. And they came out I think in 2010 if memory serves.
With the Wolverines.
With the Wolverine, exactly. Yeah. And still only one per set at the time.
Yeah.
I bought two.
And yeah, so that's one of the ones that like the smaller figures that had a version 1 articulation with the ball joints on the hips and the shoulders, but that they innovated in their own way because we had the spikes on the back that were completely removable and that were separate pieces, and then when it was time, when we got through evolving all of the other Covenant races to new articulation, and we said, well, now's the time to do the Hunter, and I think the first one was with the Wasp, the Halo 5 Wasp, right?
Yeah.
And so that was like from scratch. We're not reusing anything except the spikes in the back. Actually, we did reuse those parts.
Okay, yeah.
But the rest of the figure we put aside, and it was a from scratch design job. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's so many different molds. It's crazy. Yeah, the ones everybody loves.
When the first photos of the Wasp set came onto Facebook, I remember being in multiple Facebook groups and everyone just collectively exploded. Like we were just like, oh my god, they actually did it. They made a new Hunter, and I got one, and he was massive, and I was like, this is the best thing they've ever made.
And then they included it in Heroes.
Yeah, the Revenant Hunter.
Yeah.
How close?
I remember that too. That was a crazy conversation that we had as the design team, because we, Hunters are, because of the scale, they cost a little bit more to put in the line, but we want to make sure that we use them in the right places and keep them a little bit special. And plus, I mean, it's not something that you run into in the game, right, all that often. So having a fewer in the line, I think, just increases the fact that when you do get one in the set, it's all that much more special and meaningful. But was it Halo series? Was it Heroes Series 11 that they showed 11. Up in? Yeah. We said, okay, so how do we do something?
That's the last one, Matt.
Cool.
One.
Yeah. I got two. They're still in the box.
How do we do something cool that's going to make people just say, "Oh shoot"? They didn't really just do that.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, why don't we put a Hunter, on a Halo Heroes card? And it was some interesting jostling to make it fit on the card, first of all, but also in the case pack. And budget wise, but we're super. I think everybody was super jazzed that we were able to pull it off. Yeah.
How close is it to actual scale? Do you know? During those conversations, like when you go a Spartan against the Hunter, I mean, it looks good, but is it pretty close to what's in universe?
Within the realm of buildable figures or buildable or construction toy figures, I think we're pretty close to. But the Hunter is actually something that, once in a while, there are some inconsistencies in the game and maybe it's something more like in the attached media, but so there's a little bit of wiggle room in the scale. So we're pretty good.
Yeah. Well, the Hunter has that massive shield, and if you look at the Forward Unto Dawn series, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And Chief grabs onto the shield, and you try to recreate. I've tried to recreate that in Mega, and it actually looks pretty close to what the movie was doing on a scale wise. So cool. I think they nailed it. I think another really cool thing, just to cramming a big giant figure into a heroes line, was when you guys did the didact.
Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah. I was really impressed with that. I'm like, oh, they actually put the didact in a heroes thing, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
That was the reaction we were going for. That was the reaction we were going for. We wanted to do 10 for 10, right? It was Series 10, 10th anniversary of Halo Mega Construx.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted 10 characters, and then when we got to the 9th or 10th, we said, well, let's put something that'll make fans really smile when they see. Yeah. When they see.
Well, the opportunity to get the didact if you didn't get the broadsword set too, which is really cool. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask about the Assassin's Creed line, because obviously that was the prelude to then doing removable helmets on the current Marines. So how did that then iterate into going from doing removable armor to then also removable headgear as well?
Well, the headgear is actually something that we'd been kicking around for a little while.
Yeah.
It's and we'd had we did quite a few meetings as a team with the Call of Duty team as well to see how we could standardize headgear and see for fans to be able to interchange as many accessories as possible, basically. And headgear is one of the things that came up. And since we did have experience with the Assassin's Creed line, with the removable hats and helmets and hair, we figured the Marines are something that are super doable for sure. To be able to upgrade them, and it is the Marines are sort of an extension also of what we've been doing with the Elites and the Brutes for a little while as well. When those transitioned to new articulation, they had right away the removable helmets. Yeah. So the Marines sort of went through an extra step of having fully molded heads, and then now we're as we go, we're evolving them all towards removable helmets. So in the future, and I don't think this is much of a spoiler, but spoiler alert just in case, as we continue to introduce new types of Marines, we've done so for like Halo CE now and Halo Infinite. But, in the future, when Halo 3 Marines pop up, or Halo Wars Marines, just whatever, chances are they'll have a removable helmet.
Oh, love it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So not saying when and if they're coming, but chances are they will.
Awesome.
So I have one question, because I feel like maybe it was addressed in the forums and all that other stuff, but just kind of back to the Heroes line. So it's, figures adjacent, but the base plates changed from the Heroes lines, right? From that little triangle to the square. What was the decision process to make that change?
There were a couple of different things. There was we wanted to simplify the blisters on the packaging to make the blisters and the overall packaging more sustainable. Mm-hmm. And so removing some parts from the blister or from the overall packaging helped in that instance. But from the design side, those first stands were not designed for use with figures initially. Yeah. They were designed as a building part, as an angle part on another, on a building set. And posing figures when posts aren't lined up in a straight line but are in a diagonal is tricky. And we there was the rod in the back that could give dynamic posing and that could maybe help out a little bit on that aspect. But we figured on the design side, what if we used a part that was a little bit more simple and intuitive for people to snap the figures on? And that meant having a part with 6 posts, 2x3 basically space, so that you could line up your feet either on one row, or you can even spread them out, put one foot in the front and one in the back, and it still works. But it was really just a simplification overall as far as the stands.
Well, I'm sure that was a bit of a challenge for the blue team and the Cyrus, because you had those little cool stands, but then you're like, but we have to kind of like make them angled. I'm sure all of the fans, as they try to like group their heroes together or their fire teams and things like that, those angles are, the plates are cool, but then that angle does become a problem. So
you can't line them up on a shelf either. Oh, right. Sorry. You can't line them up on a shelf, and that was something that we noticed as well. You sort of had to, put the stand sideways, which is not intuitive either. And then you line up like the edges, not the edges, but the edges, not the sides of the block instead of. So it was. I think it was just to simplify all of that, all that together. And you can fasten a bunch of the new ones together as well, just using a plate underneath.
I think what I ended up doing with that is I think at the time I had like a table where I had put all my stuff, and I just put it in the center so I could see it from all angles as I walked around the table. Yep. So it's just kind of more like a center piece, which was nice too. But I get what you're saying about the shelf.
Cool. Anything else you guys want to chat about? Just evolution of the micro action figure. We still want to dive into the creation of the Haunted.
I do have a question. Ahead. How do you refer to old articulation and new articulation? Is there a special way you phrase it? Because we have 1.0, 2.0, we have old, new. How if just in the shorthand, how do you guys refer to the old and the new? Just old articulation, new articulation?
That's a good question. I don't think that we have an established vocabulary within the team, just because it's been so long now that we've transitioned over to the new articulation that it's it's no longer new, it's just articulation. The old figures are what, they're 6 or 7 years behind us now. So most of the team at Mega has either moved on or is moving, is working on other projects. So so the old articulation figures are, we have a bin of them somewhere in the design area to keep some kind of an archive, but we're very much focused on the new stuff, or the actual stuff.
Right.
I do have anniversary set, because we've been talking about old articulation, new articulation.
You mean that one in the back, right?
With
he's got 2 in there. I've seen them. Look at that.
This one here.
So with I just spotted a third.
With the mini Mr. Chief, should I call him? He is in the, what is it, like the Hot Wheels the Hot Wheels articulation. I mean, was that to just go with?
Oh, he's prepared. Oh, that's so.
So he's got he still has the same peg shoulders, but he just has static elbows and knees, but he still has you can move the hips and the. So what was the reasoning for going back to that style for him instead of keeping him like a Spartan painted like Mr. Chief?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it, actually. Looking at Mr. Chief and what Mr. Chief is, I mean, how, the origins of Mr. Chief is basically a sketch, right?
Yeah.
So it's a 2D image, low res, low poly.
Yeah, it's a joke.
yeah, it started out like that. So so we wanted to keep that essence. The figures, the current figures of super articulation, they just have too much detail for something like this.
That makes sense.
So we really wanted to keep that round, chibi, super deformed look. And the Hot Wheels figures actually we felt worked really well, because they're just very plain. They allowed us to really just translate print the details of exactly, to print all of the details on, just like if it was a sketch.
Mm-hmm.
And
has
has
anybody attempted, a fan attempted to create Mr. Chief from the new articulation characters that you've seen, Gabe? Is there a Mr. Chief on
I don't think
Master
I
Chief?
have witnessed anybody trying to make a custom Mr. Chief. I'm doing it now, so nobody else is
your
allowed
homework,
to do it.
Gabe. You've got to go away and do that.
Well, my second question attached to that was like, do you remember the response you got when Mr. Chief was revealed alongside all that set? Like, was there a difference, or was it majority it was positive? Because I remember when I revealed Mr. Chief, I was waiting for people to be like, what is this? And everyone was like, that's the best thing ever. And they were so excited, and I was shocked.
So the response internally was fantastic. And then when we actually showed the idea, or when we showed the idea of the anniversary pack to our partners at 343, they said yes. We weren't that Mr. Chief was like the question. Would we be able to do it? Would they want us to do it? Would it be an issue? Anywhere along the line? But the second that we talked to them about, can we do Mr. Chief? Can we possibly include him in the 20th anniversary? They said yes, for sure. And
awesome.
And so I think the response across the board from fans or anybody involved in the project has just been fantastic. And while we're here, I found this in my stuff the other day too. I don't know if maybe you might be interested. This is actually a mock-up. I don't think anybody really has seen this very much, but this is actually a mock-up we did a few years ago.
That's so cool.
Oh.
This is a painted prototype we did a few years ago, before the 20th anniversary was just it wasn't a thing. It was just for fun. It was just something that, hey, it would be fun maybe sometime to put in a blind bag series or something like that.
That's amazing.
Awesome. But obviously, he's evolved quite a bit in his final form. But that was using the old Block Squad figures from way back when.
Wow.
So anyway,
cool.
Thought you might get a kick out of
that. That's neat.
Well, it just shows. I mean, we're all Halo fans, but it shows. This is the same line that has like a skull face inside of a mask, has like this goofy little figure, right? Like, so it just shows you the breadth of the brand. Just pretty cool.
It's also kind of neat
cool.
to see Mega in on that joke,
Yeah,
right. Just kind of everyone, all the fans know it,
I think we covered a lot of ground, so that was awesome. Thank you for that background on the micro action figure. I think that'll be really interesting to a lot of collectors, a lot of fans. Why don't we dive into the plans for the Spartan Haunted? I want to hand this over to our expert, our figure expert, Gabe, to help lead that conversation as he creates his own custom figures, and Kevin's in that same business. And I want to hear how that happens from the larger standpoint, right? That Mega creates their figures. So, Gabe, why don't you take it from here?
All right. So, Haunted Spartan, that's going to be. I imagine that's going to be tricky. With the design team, is there anything you all are worried about when it comes to this? Like, is there one part that you think is going to be like the hurdle to get over before you actually finish the Haunted Spartan piece?
Yeah.
That's a good question. We've started jumping into this. And so right now the challenging part is just the way that we're approaching it is that we're making a new mold for the head. And the head is basically a Spartan pilot, right? So with a clear visor in the front. So what we're planning is that we're replicating that, right?
Okay.
So it's going to be, the head is going to be two parts. It's going to be the molded helmet with the skull face integrated, and the clear visor will snap as a separate piece on top.
Oh.
Okay. So can I ask?
So,
that's amazing.
There's a couple of reasons why we want to do it that way. One of them is that we want to be able to keep, we want to have as much detail in it. So the sculpted face, the sculpted Spartan, and everything, skeleton head underneath is something that we really want to draw attention to. And then the clear visor gives us the option to use it as a Spartan Haunted now. But then in the future, that clear visor can be molded gold or silver or red and be used as a pilot, a Spartan pilot down the road. So, the two-piece helmet will be implemented when we start designing it, or when we continue designing it.
I almost asked when we were talking about helmets, I go, would you ever have helmets that had like pieces that snap on and off with like little antennas or anything like that? That's so cool.
Yeah. So that's the biggest challenge, because it poses an interesting engineering challenge. Design/engineering, because we need to make sure that separate piece works well, snaps in place in a way that it's safe, and that also that when kids are playing with it, it doesn't fall off all the time. So we're looking at several different ways of attaching it there, permanently or semi-permanently. But with a little bit of work, Gabe, I'm sure you'll be able to pop it off.
I mean, that's the one problem that I have run into when making my own custom Haunted figures, is that I do the skull and I do the paint and I do the attachments, and then I get to the visor and I kind of hit a roadblock, because I'm like, well, how do I mean, I could sculpt it, but it wouldn't be see-through, and then I don't have anything that's malleable enough to be smoothed over and see through. I've never gotten past that point. So all of my customs are just
trick of the trade, though. If and I think that it's something that we sometimes use, that the prototype makers at Mega use sometimes. Before we 3D, now we use 3D printers for all the parts, and we can mold them in clear if we want. But you can always use the bubble off of a blister pack. Cut it to the shape that you want and heat it with a heat gun, and then you can place it over top of your to create the visor. That's one option you might.
I might have to take that.
So not only can you play with the figure, but you can use the box.
That's great.
That's why I was so excited when you said it was going to have a removable visor, because that's something even I've been trying to do that for months now. But I'm so happy that you've confirmed that it's going to be a two-piece mold. That's awesome. It will. I'm so excited.
We're also there'll also be a third piece that we're going to introduce with the Spartan Haunted, and because we had budgeted a certain number of molds, and so we have the head, and then we have the visor, and just to make them a little bit extra special, we'll also be doing the breacher chest armor.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
Game's reaction.
So I take it that was the right call.
So there's two reasons why that makes me super happy. For one, my next question to you was going to be if it was, it's the Haunted Spartan, but in reality, it's just a helmet. So I was curious if there would be anything else more than just a new head mold. So that is great news. But also, if I can just keep talking about myself a little bit. The first Haunted Spartan that I've made was a blue and gray Haunted Spartan with a breacher chest piece, and that's a piece I've been wanting you all to make for a long time. But just personally, I'm really excited about that. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Well, it'll debut with the Spartan Haunted, and then I'm sure you'll see it. It'll pop up again in future sets, but it'll be exclusive to Haunted, at least for the launch, for the first season.
Gabe, just talking about his figure for a second, asked me, are you able to say what colors that this fan voted Haunted is coming in, or is that to be determined?
Not at this point. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So something to look forward to.
Since the Haunted, since the Spartan Haunted is one of the last things that we're finishing up for 2022. Right. He's going to be he's only once in the line, right? He's only in the fan vote Halo Heroes for fall 22, and then we'll try to release different colors in the future, but for now he'll be just in that one spot for 2022.
I wanted to come back to the visor quickly, just because my brain instantly made connections there. So will that be taking learnings from the figure you did from Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, where that had the little visor that popped off the front? Because obviously that was a really small piece.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's one of the inspirations that we had was that figure.
Cool.
It was the little scuba, the scuba diver, wasn't it? Yeah. I can put.
Yeah. I'll get some photos for you to include, Matt.
A hazmat trooper, I think, or something like that.
Cool.
Interesting side note: the designer that, or one of the designers that's working on Spartan Haunted, he transitioned over from the Call of Duty team. So when we were talking about doing a two-piece head with the visor, that's the first thing he went to is, hey, we've done that before. We know how to do this.
I bet that experience was very helpful.
I get experience. Yeah. That's cool.
Well, so speaking of designers, that leads perfectly into my next question. Can you give us any idea about what the first step of designing the Haunted, I guess I should say, was or will be, depending how far you are in the process? How do you start with a new helmet, especially something so complex as, like you've already said, it's two pieces and it has a skull on the inside?
Yeah. So we start the first process is really we look at the figure and we say, okay, so what are the new parts that we need? So obviously, in this case, the helmet, we decided to go with the visor, and we're adding the breacher chest piece. But so once we know that, then it's okay. So what are the other existing pieces that we have that have to go around? What are we using to go around those pieces? What are we surrounding those new pieces with? Now in this case, it's a Reach Spartan, pretty a multiplayer Spartan. So some of those pieces are pretty simple to digest or to decide on. But we have a bank of existing parts for Reach, so we'll take a look at which ones, which boots we want to use, and which shoulder pads we want to use, et cetera. So what we do is we'll sketch it out, or we'll use existing assets that we can find and say, okay, well, these are the new parts, and these are the existing parts, and then point the existing parts with existing part numbers, just so that we create some kind of a document to start us off, so that everybody's sort of on the same page as to what are the parts we're using, and which ones are new. So, and then during that same step, we also usually start receiving official assets from our partners at 343, and so then we have some good views of the front, the side, and the back of the helmet and everything else like that. Then what happens is that once we've figured out pretty much what we're using as far as parts, which and we have some good assets, we'll transfer that over to the digital sculpting team, and they're going to they'll get to work right away on the new parts. So they'll digitally sculpt them using various programs, and with input from the design team continually, because they'll do a pass, they'll show us, we'll say, well, raise the nose or widen the ears or whatever it is. So we'll give that type of feedback, and at the same time we'll start involving the engineering team as well, because something like the Spartan Haunted, which has the visor, even though we've done it on a figure before, we want to make sure that the engineering team knows that we're doing this again, since there can be risks, and we want to eliminate those right from the beginning. We want to make sure that everything is moldable, all the parts are safe. We want to make sure that the visor is not so teeny tiny that the minute you take it out of the blister, it falls in the carpet and you never see it again. So it's we want to make sure that everything holds together properly. And that in the end, this is not just something that we're producing one of, that we can produce it, that we can produce tens of thousands of.
Yeah.
Right.
And then so once the digital sculpting phase is finished, and that's usually
How
the
long?
longest phase.
Yeah, how long does that usually take?
Several weeks, because well, only because there'll be other stuff on the plate at the same time. So
Sure.
the sculpting team is 5 people, but they also they take care of Halo and Masters of Universe and Pokemon and preschool and
Very
everybody
busy.
else. So they're I have nothing but respect for that team.
They're doing a great job, by the way.
They work
all
hard
those
and they
figures.
pump it
Holy
out.
smokes!
Yep. And so it'll take a few weeks, and we'll give feedback along the way, like I said, with the engineering team and everything. And then but once that stage is done and we're all reasonably happy with what it looks like on the computer screen, then we go to the 3D printing phase. And then we usually print out a couple of copies. That's when we start assembling the final, or putting together the existing parts with the new parts. We see then also if there's any seams that need to be improved on, for example, where the front and back shoulder armor fits, or chest armor fits, I should say. Make sure that everything works well together like we were expecting it to work. Sometimes we get to that phase and we realize maybe the head is 5% too big or 5% too small. Right. It doesn't, necessarily clear the shoulder armor around the neck, and then all of a sudden the articulation is not useful anymore. So okay, tweak the shapes around or the size of the head overall to make it work. We also line up the new sculpt with all of the existing sculpts to make sure that those proportions aren't off, that we don't have a Spartan head that's this size and the other one's this size, and the sizes pretty much line up. And so on, and then all of the final adjustments are made at that stage. And then then the design continues with okay, so we have the new parts, we like them. We submit them to the licensor, but at the same time for their approval. But at the same time, also we're coloring the model. So we'll take the new parts and then we'll assemble them in our 3D program, and we'll start applying color and decos to the figure and figuring out
so
how much.
So there's no color up until this point at all.
No, exactly. Okay.
Sometimes
it starts with like the end part of the sculpting phase. We'll use preliminary parts once in a while to get to keep the ball rolling seamlessly, but for the most part, it starts pretty much when the parts are final.
So and this is, it can be applied to the Haunted, but this is a personal curiosity, being a painter and a sculptor. How will details be applied to a figure after the main molding is done? Like, how do you get small paint apps on it? Is there just a big stamp machine that puts colors on there?
Yeah, it depends on what type of detail you're looking at. If washes or weatherings is different, but certain painting details are done using a paint mask. So it's basically just you take a figure, and then like the hair for the pilot, for instance, that's a paint mask. So they'll take the part and it'll go in a big clamp, and everything that's not to be painted is hidden, and everything that has to be painted is visible. And then they'll just go, they'll just apply the paint that way. And so that's something, that's reproducible, and that you can produce multiple units per minute, basically.
Yeah.
So that's one way. And then the other way that we use a lot is it's a process called pad printing, where you're basically taking, your figure or part of your figure, putting it in a jig of some kind, and you do have like a big with a sound effect like that, exactly. And you're stamping, So all the Spartan skins or the coatings that we do usually are done like that.
That's what I had assumed for a long time, but that's awesome to know.
Yeah. There's a bunch of YouTube, not tutorials, but lessons, I guess, that how-tos on YouTube that you can find about those processes.
With the stamping now, with the new articulation and the armor pieces that come off, are the armor pieces all stamped individually? Or is it the figure's done, assembled, and then it's stamped? Because sometimes he's disassembled in the bag.
Yeah, it's a case by case. It really is a case by case. It really depends on what type of pattern we're going with. Sometimes it's complete figures, and sometimes it really is individual pieces. Really? And sometimes it's a combination of pieces. If you take a look, trying to find a good example, but sometimes when, like on a building set, if you have two pieces that go together that have to have a coherent pattern along the way, or, you know, that we're printing, those are actually put together inside the
oh, wow.
And
That's super cool.
Just so that everything lines up.
Exactly. Exactly.
Nice.
And then it's a way of ensuring quality.
I was just going to ask if you did the sculpting, do you do those initial, I don't know, lab work on a 3D printer, just that you guys have available? Or I guess how is that process done when you're kind of iterating before you're kind of sending it to mass production?
Yeah, we have 3D printers in house, so definitely, you know, we usually have go through like a couple of versions. We'll 3D print once we're pretty close to a final version that we like digitally, and then, you know, we'll have the sculptors tweak the file after that based on what it looks like and how it works as well, you know, in hand, physically. And then we'll print out a final version. And the final version, you know, we can print anywhere between, you know, 6, 10, 12, 20, whatever number we need, because usually, you know, we'll need some to keep in house to do validations and to keep with like the master prototype model. But we'll also 3D print a bunch for trade shows and events and stuff like that where prototypes are needed. And so, you know, those head off to the prototype shop. They get painted in the real colors and everything, and shipped out for events.
Great.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So design process, good to go. Understood. How do you take something with that much detail? And I guess in the Haunted's case, you know, you've got a removal, or you will hopefully have a removal visor. You have a helmet. How do you take all of that and you transfer it into, I mean, mass productions by the thousands? How does that process go from like, okay, you built the figure, now we produce it for thousands of people?
Yeah. Well, what happens is it's actually quite simple. We, you know, since everything is sculpted digitally, then it's just a digital file that we can transfer to the factory. And they'll start, you know, based on that, they'll start cutting steel to create the new molds. And, you know, as far as the deco is concerned, well, the deco is really, sometimes it's what we call a paint master that we send. So it's a physical prototype that's been painted up with all the details that we'll send off, you know, through regular mail to the factory. But more often than not, you know, just a document with a file with all of the print information in it is sufficient. And you know, they get good views of each side, and once they produce, you know, samples of from the first test shots from the molds, and once they put everything together, they send us samples to review. So we review the new parts as far as the first shots and the subsequent shots, so that we can tweak the molds as far as for fit and level of detail and everything. And then as far as the deco, they'll send samples for that as well, and we'll review and make sure that the lines are crisp, and that you know, everything that we intended for the figure translated well through the communication process.
Wow.
I see. Awesome.
Yeah.
How long does that process take? Like, is that the longest part of the deal?
Yeah, the design phase, you know, if we're talking a 6 to 8 month cycle, the actual design phase is probably half of that, and then, you know, the production ramp up and everything else is another several months. And you know, there's a bunch of samples and that we receive, and a bunch of checks and verifications that we have to do along the way. So that's why we end up with stuff like this at home, where we can look at and say, okay, well, not just the figures and the deco, but the box, the packaging, the blister, and the the graphics and everything else. We can review before they start the machines for real and really start pumping them out.
Yeah. I gotta say, I always knew that so much detail, actually we see the finished product, and it's amazing. As you see the finished product, you go, oh, a lot of time and love went into this, but it sounds so tedious and stressful. I'd be like, gotta make sure it's all I don't know if I could do it. It sounds like, especially, Gabe makes amazing figures on one at a time, but I just can't imagine planning and doing it for such a huge scale. To me, and I know you said that was just a file, but they must be some very, very sophisticated machines that they have that do all the printing and all the stamping. That just blows my mind.
Visiting the factory is always something that's quite special, because it's like you said, it's a unique experience when you go for the first time. And I think I visited the factory in Montreal several times, and every time it blows my mind. Just you walk by the molding machines, and every 10-15 seconds it spits out 60 blocks or whatever it is.
That would be amazing.
It's magical every time. So.
And you said cutting steel. So is there a mold?
So,
okay. I was gonna say, is there a mold? Is there a mold for every does the first mold exist, or are those thrown away and recycled eventually?
I'm sorry?
So could you go back, just theoretically, and create one of the first Halo figures? Does that capability still exist, or is that stuff all kind of recycled, reused after the manufacturing is done?
Since for a building or a construction toy company, it's important we maintain the molds. We keep them around as much as we can, because we do figures is one thing, but just the regular blocks is another thing. We do reuse a lot. It's the basis, right? So theoretically, we could go back and say we can reprint some of the earliest figures. It really there is a regular cycle of if we haven't used certain parts for a certain while, then we do start questioning, do we still need it? And so probably the earliest figures, I don't know if those molds still exist.
Sure.
That's a very good question that I'd have to look into. But theoretically, figures that are still part of the bank, like all the super articulated figures, the molds still exist for sure, because there's always the chance that we can bring them back. We might use Spartan Oceanic, for instance, in an upcoming series. Probably won't, but I'm just saying we could.
Well, and I think it'll be interesting. So as you're going through the process of showing us how Spartan is created, I would love if there was time or a capability to kind of see what that factory looks like and show that to some of the fans. I think that would be a really cool portion. Obviously, we all want to hear about the design stuff as well and the painting, but the mass production, I think, would be a fun element as well.
Yes,
cool.
I was thinking about that. Get some video of them being printed would be so neat, just to kind of see
BTS footage.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That's so neat. The whole process it just gives me an added layer of appreciation to just how much is I just every little detail that you guys scrubbed through is just amazing.
It's big.
The hard work definitely shows, for sure, though.
Something that struck me as well, I've been sat messing around with this little COD figure the whole time since I grabbed it, and it's the fact that obviously you do all of that sculpting as well, and then you think about the things like the accessories that clip onto figures that have the peg system, the weapons they use, all of that stuff has to be considered for just that one figure, and then the
figure has to
so
be able to move.
Things. Yeah.
The stand as well. Since we rebooted, we spoke about the stand earlier, but the stand every time we do a new series now, we also reboot the graphic on the stand.
Yeah.
And so that's also something that goes into, we ask ourselves every season what we're printing on the stand, aside from the name of the character, of course. So it's a lot of detail work, and the team is very dedicated to getting it right, and to also to trying to ensure that there's continuity, so that you can keep on adding to your collection, and that everything works together.
Man, I could keep talking about this for hours.
Well, I'm gonna.
Wait, really
I'm gonna.
I did want to just ask about going back to Masters of the Universe and the Panther, because the Panther with the I don't know what you call it, the flocking really interests me. So like, how is that? Is that added like a paint application with the mold, or is it like, how is that furry part put on?
That's a good question. I couldn't say specifically how our Panther is done. I know that there are a couple of different processes for flocking. One of them involves electrostatic charge, where you basically put the figure inside of a box, and then you like throw the box of hair, I guess, in there, and everything sort of electrostatically clings to the figure. And then I think there's also like spray glues and different adhesives that you can use, and basically use variants of all that of the process. So again, YouTube, I think, has like millions of videos that if you're curious about,
I'm gonna go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, because I'm not sure which version is currently used in production. It's not something that we've done very much in the past, flocking.
Right. That's why it's so interesting to me.
Yeah, and we've done it twice now for the Masters of Universe line. We did it for Panther, and we also did it for
Mossman.
There was Mossman in Battle Bones is also partially flocked.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder if in the future we could ever see some flocked brutes, some little fuzz brute figures. Huh?
Yeah, we've been talking about it. We've been mostly joking about it. Yeah, we mentioned it. Hey, what if the next Tartarus was flocked? But
Atriox has a little beard.
We'll see.
Yeah. That's so neat, though. Just like
why don't I awesome. Move it over to we had a few extra questions regarding the fan vote and the haunted figure. Colin, you all right if I start off with the first one?
Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll close the show. We're running along. This has been fantastic so far. So thanks again for your time, Kevin.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Our first question here. So, were there any? I remember during the fan vote, there was a hashtag you could use for like community things, or like people, if they made any customs or built something, they could use the hashtag to show you all. Were there any like standout community creations that were inspired by the fan voting process?
We saw, I think, I don't have the names in front of me, but we saw quite a few custom creations based on the fan votes during the campaign and since. And we actually, one of the things that when we were hashing out what the candidates were going to be, we also saw a lot of customs from the 4 candidates during our our selection process, when we were deciding which 4 figures we wanted people to vote on. And so that was really fun, because we could point to those and say, hey, people are customizing these figures, so there is there are people out there that want these figures. So that was really, really cool. And the other thing I think that stood out was just the amount of memes. The community was on fire. With the number of memes, and they were all more hilarious than the previous one. So it was great. It was great.
That is for sure.
I made a meme actually too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a funny one I poked at you, Gabe, with General Hux.
Well, I had, because I had said I wanted the Flood to win, and I ended up making a flaming haunted figure, and then it ended up winning. And yeah, that was a mistake. I should have made a flaming flood.
What are you talking about? Great choice.
But one of the next questions is, how did I mean, well, you had just mentioned this, picking, the 4 figures to be voted upon. How did you all solidify, like, picking a Flood, Thrall Slayer, a Haunted, and a CQB? Like, how did those choices become the ones?
Yeah, that was we went back and forth. We talked about it as a team to see. We set a few goals. We wanted to have several factions involved.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to make sure there was a nice mix of colors as far as the characters go, and of shapes, I guess, body types. So
Right.
So that's where we have a banished and a brute. Banished brute, or I should say it was a covenant brute, but precursor. And then there was a flood form, and then a Spartan. Well, a couple of Spartans, but one that's more more historical, I guess, with the CQB, and then one that's more legendary with the. So there was the mix, but we also not just internally, we did go through as many like top 10, top 5, whatever lists that we could find. To see what fans, what they were asking for.
Lists.
Yeah.
Cool.
The fan lists were definitely very, very helpful in this.
So Mega listens,
instance.
which is great.
Yeah,
we
that's
do
awesome.
our best. We do our best. In the comments, guys, comment what would you like to see in a possible future fan vote.
Oh,
yeah,
I think that's a good opportunity to ask.
Go
So
comment down below.
if anybody wants to comment a choice for a figure, we'll take a read as to what.
Thrall Slayer.
Yeah.
The way I pictured this fan vote was like each designer was like, oh, as they were picking the line, they're like, oh no, I want this one, I want this one, I want this, and they're like, well, and you guys couldn't decide, and you're like, we know what, we'll put it to a vote.
Right.
So I mean, outside of those 4, were there any? I mean, you said you looked at lists. Were there any runners up? I guess if those didn't make it in, were there any choices?
Yep, there were.
Can we know what those were?
Sure, I can name a few. We had, I think we had something like 5 or 6 PowerPoint slides just full of images and candidates,
Awesome.
ranging from different Spartans from, like, say, Halo Legends, like Solomon and Arthur.
Oh my
gosh. Stuff from transmedia, I guess, more like Spartan Jonah, which is or Joshua, or like Daisy.
Daisy.
Yeah.
Daisy.
Stuff like Spartans Hazel and Owen from Outpost Discovery. Uze Taham had came onto the subject as well from Halo 3.
Halo 3.
Oh yeah.
And stuff like Private Jenkins from Halo CE.
Oh,
the Marine with
there we go.
Jenkins.
And
like one, right?
Spartan Mariner was on the list at one point.
Oh.
So we were looking, far and wide for what the 4 candidates were going to be.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
Those are super cool.
Well, use your voice. I think if you want Mega to keep doing it, there's so many options. That would be fun to keep that going. So
I think you might have just opened up the next victor by saying Jenkins, though, because I feel like that's
right.
favorite.
One that we found funny, but I don't know if we would actually do it, was we actually had Craig the Brute on the list.
Oh
Yes.
Gosh.
Oh no.
Mr. Chief and Craig the Brute would have been
that would have been a beautiful
that would have been
combo.
a pair.
Yeah.
So, do you think maybe we could ever see a fan vote again in the future?
The first one was so well received that we have been talking about what are we doing next? Are we doing it again for 2023? Is it going to take another shape, or another do it another way, or for maybe another element in the line? We'll see. We'll keep you informed. But for sure, the fact that the first one went so well, I think that it gives us arguments to be able to do it again in the future.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Thanks. That'd be great.
Super cool.
Well, Colin, you want to take over?
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks again, Kevin, for your time. Again, super interesting conversation, and thanks for being open to the questions as well. Sometimes I know can they tell us this? And sometimes you can, so we gotta ask. So this has been great. Anything you want to talk about before we close the show, Kevin? Halo Infinite or anything else?
No, I think we've covered most of what we wanted to talk about. Like I said, if we do decide to do a future fan vote, feel free to comment in the comment section what you guys would like to see, and we'll certainly read all of the comments.
Awesome. Yeah. So good to hear that you guys do listen to the fans. It's been great. So thanks again for your time. That will do it for our show. If you like the show, feel free to support Podcast Evolved on Patreon. Until next time, evolved.
Evolved.
Evolved.